I went to the school at the age of 10 as a boy in 1931, and I left in 1938 when I was in the sixth form. Well, first of all, the building was in the centre of the town. Most of the boys went to the school either by walking or on a bicycle. There were trams in those days, so riding a bicycle you had to be careful because you didn't want to go. If you got into the tram lines, you normally fell off. So it wasn't easy. But if we didn't go by bicycle, then we went by tram. We all used to form up in the playground, and the person who did it was the caretaker, Manning. He was a great man. He used to get everybody in forms, and then we used to go into the school. The juniors, first form, prep and the first form, had prayers upstairs, and Miss Short was, she used to play the piano for the hymns, and downstairs, second forms onwards, used to have prayers, and the organ was played by the music master, Percy Small. Percy Small won £1,000 on the News of the World crossword, and that's when he retired. When I went to the school, our houses were given to us, allocated by the deputy head, who was Edwards. And my father was teaching at the school because he'd been there since 1921, and he was in Sparta. And I thought I would go into Sparta. But in fact, Edwards had other ideas, and he said, "You will go into Tuscany." He was a fearsome character, and he would keep order just by his appearance. Generally, we had 7 periods a day, 4 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon. 9 till 12:05 was the morning session. 2 o'clock till 4:05 was the afternoon session. We all were issued with textbooks. We didn't, scholarship boys had to, they got them free. People who paid, and most of us did, that was £3.50 a term. We had to buy textbooks. And practically every subject had a textbook. Upstairs in the old building was the dining room, and you could get a lunch there. It used to cost, in those days, 11p. It wasn't very good, though. So not many boys used to stay to lunch. Most of us used to have lunch at Garron's, opposite the school. And you could get a lunch there. We used to get soup for 2p, and we would get quite a good second course for 4p. So the lunch used to cost 8p or 9p with a sweet, except Thursday. I used to walk down and have lunch with my father on Thursday. We used to go to Lyons in the High Street. My father went to college in 1907 to 9, and then he got his degree, and later he became a fellow of the Geological Society. He taught first of all at the Jewish Free School in London, and he learned Hebrew, and in fact he could speak Hebrew, because he coached the boys for their bar mitzvahs. And for years afterwards, my mother had all her clothes made by Calander, who was a Jewish tailor. When he moved from London, he was living in London at Hornchurch, and he moved into a house in Westborough Road. And next to him, next door, was a man who taught at Southend High School for boys. And he eventually moved and he'd got a headship in Scotland. And he suggested to my father that he applied for the job. And he did. And he was appointed by Hitchcock, because in those days it wasn't the governors and the education committee that appointed teachers, it was the headmaster. And he was appointed in 1921. Well, I knew Dr. Moore very well because he had a son called Peter. And Peter and I were the same age. And Peter Moore went to Allen Court, and I had been to Glendale, they were private schools in Crowstone Road. And when I went to the high school, Peter Moore, Dr. Moore's son, he went to Bedford public school. And at the end of the first term, he came home ill, and he died. And it was a great loss to Dr. Moore, and it had a great effect on him for a number of years. Dr. Moore also had a daughter called Barbara, with whom I'm still in touch. She became a doctor, medical doctor, and she's a widow now. She lives in Croydon. Dr. Moore was a member of the Old Southendian Masonic Lodge, and one of the precepts in Masonry is that the foundation stone is always laid on the right-hand side of the building. And Dr. Moore had arranged that the foundation stone of the present school would be in the front next to the entrance. The architects then found eventually, just before it was going to be built, that the school was too big for the space in Earls Hall Avenue, because originally the entrance to the school was going to be in Earls Hall Avenue. And so what the architects did was turn the school round. Now this caused an awful lot of confusion, but it meant that the foundation stone would be now on the left and not the right. And so it was changed. And the foundation stone of the present school is now at the side, on the right-hand side of the front of the stage. And a lot of people never look at it. In fact, they might not even know it's there. The school building originally cost £85,000. And the railings round the school, along Prittlewell Chase, and the railings were £10,000. And of course, when it was built, they also built air raid shelters underground. Of course, it's quite different now. I mean, there used to be a vegetable patch. I used to have an allotment there, and there were two allotments right across the other side of the field. Jack Newman had one, Freddie Phelps had the other. In 1951, I went to school as a teacher, and I was there until 1981. I was there 30 years. in which time I taught biology. I had ideas of becoming a teacher in 1938, and I applied to join my father's old college, St Paul's, in Cheltenham. And I was accepted. But in August 1939, I was mobilised into the Air Force as a sergeant pilot. And so that put an end to college. I had an accident in the Air Force, flying accident, so I failed what they call a height test at 8,000 feet. You used oxygen after 8,000 feet, and I wasn't able to. Anyway, so they sent me to, I had a course in London under a Dr. Pullin, and for the Air Ministry Inspection Directorate, called the AID. And at the end of this course, which lasted about 6 weeks, you were sent to an aircraft factory, and I was sent to Short Brothers at Rochester, where we made flying boats. And I was there until 1947. That's where I met my wife. And we were married in 45. And in 47 I went to college, because they were taking, in 1947, all ex-service people. And that's when I went. I went to Cheltenham College from 47 to 49. Well, I came out of college in 49, and my first job was at Southend High School, and I was there till 51. I was there 2 years, and I went from there to Southend High School. We certainly did have several characters at school, and one of them certainly was Viv Stanchel. He was in my form at school, C form, and he appeared one morning in the doorway, because we used to take dinner money before we went down to the hall for prayers. And he opened the door and came in, and he was dressed in black and white trousers, a white waistcoat, patent shoes, and I sent him back home. I said, go home and change and come back properly dressed. On his way out, he met the head, Price, who also saw him. And he was expelled. He went to the art school. He was a good artist. He rang me up and said, could he come and see me, because he was bringing with him the BBC. And a group came, like yourselves, in this room, and they recorded a conversation between me and Vivian Stanchel, which I've got on tape. He was a bit balmy, and he got married. He lived on a houseboat in the Thames, and he put barbed wire between himself and his wife in bed. Eventually, he died. He drank himself to death, and I think in so doing, it caught fire. Francis Price was the headmaster, and I was the first person he appointed to the school on the staff. He'd been educated at the Royal Masonic School because his father had been killed in the war, and he was educated at the Royal Masonic School for boys, as it was in those days. He joined the Old Southendian Masonic Lodge, as one would have expected, and as a result, in a very short time, some 8 members of the staff also joined the lodge. I can't really say very much more about Price, except I think he was a very good headmaster. He carried on with the traditions of the school. He didn't change much. He didn't introduce much, but he carried on as it had been, and he encouraged, I think, old boys to do for the school all that they could. And I've got great admiration for Mr. Price because he was certainly a good headmaster in many, many ways. Well, I think Ted Morris, as a headmaster, was a disaster. I can tell you what he got rid of. We had, in the entrance, when you went into the school, on the right was a waiting room, and there was a board of honours there of boys from the beginning of the school who got honours at university. And one of them on that list was Charlie Lewis, who was later a master at the school. Ted Morris had it pulled down and burnt in the school. They used to, in those days, have coke and ovens for heating. Ted Morris got rid of that. Worse than that, Mrs. Alexander, who'd been a teacher at the school, had given each house, Tuscany, Troy, Sparta and Athens, a house banner. Ted Morris destroyed all 4. Ted Morris also got rid of Cricket Week. He stopped that. He stopped house socials. And he did untold damage, I think, to the school. But that's only my opinion. Alderman Musset. He was chairman of the Education Committee. He was also chairman of the Board of Governors. And he introduced a scheme whereby one of the teaching staff would be elected by the staff to be a governor. And I was the first teacher governor elected to do that. Well, I introduced the prepaid life scheme. That is for subscription to the Old Southendian Association, whereby a boy could pay, before he left school, a sum towards the subscription for the old boys. And it meant that we got most, not all, most of the boys who were leaving joining the association, which was the object of the exercise.